Good evening. The special meeting of the Westland Community School Board of Education is now brought to order on Thursday, August 24th, 2017 at 5 o'clock. On behalf of the Board of Education, I would like to welcome each and every one of you. Your attendance here reflects your interest in local education and is greatly appreciated. So, welcome back, everybody. This is our second night of interviews. For those who were here on Tuesday, it will be the same process. For those who weren't here, what's going to happen is we'll bring in each candidate. We'll interview them. We have Dr. Marlene Davis. She's our facilitator. She's going to be asking the questions as we listen. When the candidate is done with their interview, there will be an opportunity for you all to fill out feedback forms. Those are very important, so make sure you get those. There will be a little bit of a break in between the first candidate, the second candidate, and the third candidate. And that's pretty much it. So let's go into item number 160.18, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 161.18, roll call of attendance, Ms. Hines.
Mr. Cox?
Present.
Mr. Buckaloo?
Present.
Dr. Weaver? Ms. Hines present. Ms. Madison? Ms. Medill?
I'm here.
Ms. Walker?
Present.
Let the record show 7-0.
Thank you. Item number 162.18, citizen comments, agenda items only. Okay, seeing none. We're going to go to item number 163.18, superintendent search selection process. And like I mentioned before, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Marlene Davis. She's going to bring in each candidate. She's going to facilitate the questions, and then we'll listen. So she should be coming in shortly with the first candidate.
Come down and around. I'm very short, so I hope my arms can reach over.
Hello again.
Welcome. Madam President, welcome.
Are we far enough to the left?
Is that a political question?
Last time.
Is that a political question?
That's political.
Okay.
When you're settled, let me know.
I'm just taking out a notepad.
Okay. I poured water for you so you don't have to do that yourself.
You're too kind. Thank you. Perfect. All set.
Well, good evening.
Good evening.
This interview will last about an hour, and there'll be 18 questions. And so keep that in mind as you're responding and you have the questions in front of you. I will, if we get behind, I'll let you know that we need to speed it up to get through all the questions. So let's start with the first question. The board's had an opportunity to review your resume, your letters of reference, all your supporting material, but they'd like you to tell them something about yourself that might not be in your application documents and include in your response why you applied for this position.
Okay. Good evening again. Good evening, community members assembled. What you will not find in my resume is the narrative, the story behind the accomplishments, the stories behind the promotions, the story that describes who I am as an individual and as an educator. I pride myself on being an ongoing lifelong learner, in that I spend numerous hours outside of the career on professional development, on classes at the university level. I mentor. I'm dedicated to the profession in that I mentor many teachers, many other educators, including my former 9th grade teacher, who is now a principal in another district. I spend countless days giving back to committee work for the profession and for the children that we serve. To sum it up, the story that is not told is my ongoing pursuit to find a framework to make every school a school of excellence and every child a successful learner. As it pertains to my interest in being the superintendent of Wayne Westland, why not Wayne Westland? Giving deference to you and the work that you've done and to the preceding administration, the foundation has been laid in a strong strategic plan and in the representation of the entire community. Most school districts have the name community schools, but Wayne Westland is truly an educational community. When I drive through in the evenings and I see the students and the community members doing athletic events, when I see some of our senior community members coming out from their evening classes and the outreach programs, it truly represents all of the stakeholders. And that's why Wayne Westland is the choice for me.
Okay, thanks. Could you give the board some examples of how you'll maintain visibility and accessibility for staff, parents, and community if you were selected for this position?
That's probably one of the easiest questions. I always get out to a building every day. I am in classrooms, I am at student events, I am in the community, accessible to parents. Every educator that I've ever worked with in my 22-year career has access to my phone number, my personal cell phone number. I'm available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. If you ask my husband, he will tell you I sleep with my cell phone and my laptop. I'm working to break that habit. But I want to always be accessible and available to my community when they need me.
If you were selected to be superintendent, you obviously will be working with this Board of Education. What are some of the important issues that you see in creating a good board-superintendent relationship? How would you facilitate that relationship, and how will you communicate with the board?
Good board-superintendent relations begin with clear vision, transparency, integrity, and communication. Being open and honest with one another, and having that ongoing communication through multiple measures. At a minimum, a weekly update outlining what's happening in all departments, emails as other things become issues, having phone calls, meeting with each of you individually, meeting with subcommittees, having phone conversations, and seeing you out at the community events. But that communication would be open and ongoing on a consistent basis.
Jennifer, describe your experiences with strategic planning from initiation to completion of outcomes.
I've had the opportunity to work with strategic plans in 2 different school districts. One was already developed when I entered that school district, and I had an opportunity to facilitate the implementation with Fidelity. That strategic plan was brought to somewhat of a halt because unfortunately that community went through a consolidation with another school district. So the strategic plan was set aside as the districts began to consolidate. But prior to that time, the lens that I had was that of the educational achievement for the students, and I worked with various subgroups, worked with the community, and had the incorporation of stakeholder buy-in, a very collaborative process. Excuse me. My most recent experience with the strategic planning process was from its inception, where we actually went out to the community to garner feedback before we could make a root cause analysis to determine what the problem really was in the school district. And what we found in this particular district is that the students felt that the teachers didn't understand their life outside of school, and that they actually wanted more rigorous academic coursework. They felt the teachers didn't believe that they had the ability to perform at higher levels. So that's what came out of the surveys. We also did some focus groups. We did individual interviews, not only with the students, but with the staff and the business stakeholders and parents as well. From the survey data and interview data, we did the root cause analysis, made the determination, working collectively with that Board of Education, the next steps and focusing on those goals. So those goals included increasing numeracy and literacy skills in the district, better relations with the students, so the culture and climate. And after we developed the overarching goals, then we began to drill down to the sub-goals, who needed to be on those committees, a good representation of all the stakeholders on all of the subcommittees, and then began working with the subcommittees on developing the next steps, the processes and procedures, and the programs that needed to be put in place and implemented for those specific goals.
Okay, thanks. This is a question about collaboration. How would we recognize a collaborative leader if we saw one? What behaviors would we see in a collaborative leader?
A collaborative leader has an open door policy, welcoming feedback, critical conversations, willing to progress monitor and make mid-course corrections based on the feedback that they're receiving, based on the data. A collaborative leader works with all stakeholders and welcomes their input. In addition, they take out their emotion and facilitate the conversation based on the data available to them. All decisions being data-driven and respecting the voice of each individual stakeholder on that committee, including students. I think it's extremely important to have our students' voice be heard at the high school level, all the way down to the elementary level, as it pertains to their environment and their outcomes for their academic achievement.
So describe how you've collaborated with various stakeholders important to the school district in your previous positions.
In my previous position, one of the more recent collaborations came with the influx of new refugee families to the district. We didn't have a strong English language program due to the limited English language learners in the past. So I went out to the community and sought resources and sought partnerships. One was the U.S. Center for Immigration and Refugees in Dearborn. And then, although I had a language barrier with some of the families, worked collaboratively with stakeholders to listen to what they needed and to understand their culture better in order to provide them a high-quality education for their students. That's one of the most recent. In addition to the last 4 years in my particular position, when I arrived, we had a curriculum council that was very small. It was only representative of a small portion of the teaching staff. I was very intentional in going out to all of the buildings and speaking with all of the teachers and sharing with them what my vision was for the curriculum council. I'm pleased to say that after the 3 years that was in place, the curriculum council has literally grown by, I would say, 300%. It went from maybe 8 members to now we need a larger room because we may have 40 to 45 members attending on a consistent basis, and the facility can no longer hold the amount of teachers that are participating.
We can say that budgets can be seen as moral documents. Describe what process you plan to use to make sure that the budget best represents the values of the district and of the strategic plan.
I personally don't see the budget as a moral document, in that I've used 2 different methods, one being zero-based budgeting and one being outcomes-based budgeting. And depending on what portion of the budget you're focusing on at that particular time, that's when I would use one or the other. In that, with the outcomes-based budget, I generally use that when I'm looking at grants federally funded dollars that are for supplemental programs, looking at the outcome desired and then working backwards with the budget to determine where the areas of greatest need occur with the subcommittees designed for those particular funding sources. As it pertains to the general fund or the funding that comes via our student population pupil allotment, that would be more of a zero-based budgeting where we look at what we need in the district, what is equitable, not equal, to provide the best outcomes for all of our students and applying those to the appropriate areas. Again, that would not be done in isolation. That would be done collectively with the teachers, the administration, the parents, and the students in those respective buildings. But the funds would have to be spent equitably, not equally.
Okay. What do you think is the most important leadership skill?
The most important implies that there's only one, and there are several very important leadership skills. The ability to collaborate, the ability to communicate, and communicate whether you're at the park with your family, if you're in the market picking up items for dinner, if you're in a public forum or speaking to the governor. Communication is critical. Also, integrity. You have to have integrity. You have to be trustworthy and transparent in order for the staff and the community to believe in you and to follow your leadership. So if I had to pick just one, unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to do that because I think they all go hand in hand with a successful leader.
Okay. How have you improved student achievement in your present district or previous districts? What are the challenges that you see facing Wayne Westland Community Schools, and how would you address them?
I am one of few people in the state of Michigan that can state that I have successfully led teams, facilitated teams in turning around not one, but two priority high schools in the state of Michigan. It is extremely difficult to turn around a priority high school, but to do it in two districts with two completely different circumstances is no small feat. To improve the student achievement in those schools and in both respective districts, we had to gather the data and analyze the data. All decisions had to be data-driven. We had to look at our talent. We had to do some talent management to see if we had the right individuals in the right positions. And I'll give an example with his permission. The current EA president in my past district, he was teaching in a 7th grade position and he was miserable. And as a result, the students were miserable. And their academic achievement reflected all of their misery. Through coaching, we determined, and through the use of data, we determined that he was a better fit at the elementary level. He's now teaching 1st grade. He's extremely happy. The students are thriving, and they are able to attain their outcomes. So when we talk about talent management and possibly career coaching and career counseling, it doesn't necessarily mean removing the individual from the district or the school. It means finding everyone's best fit. So we did that. Also looked at some short cycle assessments to determine where the students were and where they needed to go, to look at the holes that were in the curriculum and strengthen the curriculum along the way. So we looked at the purpose behind everything that we were teaching. We looked at the student engagement. We looked at the curriculum and the pedagogy to instruct the students. We looked at all of the assessment tools that we had and determined what value we were getting from those particular assessments and eliminated some that we were not finding value in. And then also the culture and climate of the building. Did we all believe that the students had the ability to learn at a very high level? So increasing the expectations for all students to be successful learners. That is, in a nutshell, the big pieces that we put into place to move the student achievement. Now, one can say, I looked at the test scores in your previous district and they did not increase significantly. Well, the behind the scenes story was all of those steps to get to that point, and the scores are trending in the right direction. the systems, most importantly, are in place. The professional development is ongoing and job embedded, and the student growth is surpassing that of the state level. So while the students are not quite proficient, their student growth is higher than the state average.
So what about the challenges here in Wayne Westland?
The challenges here in Wayne Westland, as I looked at the scores with particularly the 3rd through 8th grade and the M-STEP scores, I see that we've had a decline over the last few years. I also looked at the budget component in comparison for the return on investment, and I do see that the district is spending a good portion of their funds in that area, and I would agree with that, particularly with the 3rd grade reading law that is now impacting our current 1st grade students for the class of 2020. So we would need to continue focusing there. Also, with the priority schools that we have, your one-to-one initiative in removing the anxiety and eliminating that failure piece for our students at the elementary level, and having the instruction customized or differentiated for each individual student and their assessment level or their skill set being communicated with the teacher, and the teacher being able to teach to their specific learning style and not giving a one-size-fits-all to every student in the class. And the students not relying on the entire class for the answers, but actually digging deeper into their own instruction and learning on their own through the one-on-one devices. So I'm excited about the priority piece and the My Excel blueprint, very well versed in that, and looking forward to helping get all those schools off the priority list. I will also state that while I was brought to districts to get schools off their priority list, in none of the 4 districts that I've ever worked has a school fallen onto the priority list or focus list under my watch.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
What role does the superintendent play with the unions in a district?
Again, you have to have integrity, you have to have transparency, you have to have open lines of communication with all of the bargaining groups. I actually spoke with the EA president, as I shared earlier, and again, he gave me permission to share his stories publicly, but he said that one of the things you can pride yourself on is the fact that if they wanted to speak to a teacher in the district, you could give them the roster of every teacher in the district, and they could pick the one that they call, because you have positive working relationships with every teacher in the district. You have very high expectations of all the teachers in the district. You listen to all of them, and you're collaborative with all of the teachers, but you also push them to a higher level. Interestingly enough, there is a teacher in the previous district who's a parent here in Wayne Westland, and the biggest honor that I received was when that teacher that I worked with said, of all the people I know, I would want you to lead the district where my children attend school. So that was very humbling to me as well as some other individual colleagues that don't work for the same school district. But going back to the role with the superintendent and the union, not to get off on a tangent, you have to have that ongoing communication. You have to be honest. With the zero-based budgeting and with the negotiations, one of the tactics that I like to use is not where you negotiate back and forth, but where you actually come together for interest-based bargaining. And not many school districts use interest-based bargaining, but it's where you actually put the objectives up on the board and you work collaboratively with the bargaining groups to arrive at that ultimate goal. I had an experience to utilize that, not in this most recent district, but 2 districts ago, when we were doing the redesign plan for that particular high school, and we knew that we selected the most aggressive plan, and that was the turnaround model, where we had to remove 50% of the staff from the building. You can imagine the EA was in shock when the Board of Education and the administration selected a model that would remove 50% of the teaching staff from the building. But again, once we went through the process and they saw that it was fair and equitable and transparent, and that the teachers were not being released but reassigned to positions that better suited their skill set, we were able to accomplish a goal. And in that particular district, we were able to get that school off the priority list within 8 months' time.
Okay, thanks. Jennifer, what's your familiarity with the 5 dimensions of teaching and learning? and the 4 dimensions of instructional leadership. Or if you're not familiar with those, give some examples of strategies you have used to help educators learn and grow.
I am familiar with the 5 dimensions, the tool developed at the University of Washington and the Center of Educational Leadership. I'm not using that model. The district and the board decided that I was working with decided to use a different model. They're using the Charlotte Danielson model, but similar to the 5 dimensions of teaching and learning, it's a framework to help improve the individual's skill set. It's a learning continuum for the teacher with the 5 dimensions, and with the building administration or building leaders, the 4 dimensions of instructional leadership. It's not a tool that's designed to be punitive. It's a tool designed to help everyone grow in their practice and in their profession. So most of my experience has been around that of the Charlotte Danielson. However, I don't foresee it being an issue using a different tool.
Okay, thanks. Describe how you provide the freedom with people that you work with. How do you describe how you provide the freedom to allow others to do their job, yet hold them accountable to outcomes for their work?
We begin with the end in mind. We have the outcome, we have the standards, we know the goals and the objectives, and then allowing them to provide that input, that creativity in the way in which they teach. As long as they come with a viable, research-based strategy with a like population, and that's very important. You have to have something that's been tested in a similar demographic, a similar student population, in order to know that it will be successful with your students. So we're not going to experiment on our students. We are going to use strategies that are scientifically proven to work with a similar demographic. They can do that through committee work. As I stated, I have a curriculum council that meets voluntarily, might I add, once a month and sometimes twice a month for 2 hours. They give up their time, and as I indicated before, the committee has grown tremendously over my time there. So we allow for that freedom and flexibility. Having been a first grade teacher, working at the elementary level, middle school level, high school level, and central office level, I have a different lens in that I understand the whole child and the cradle to career aspect. Again, very few administrators have the experience of working at every level of the organization. So I value the individual creativity that teachers bring to the table.
Okay, thanks.
But might I add, you also have to progress monitor and make sure it's going well for those outcomes, and if not, you have to make some mid-course corrections.
Okay. That's it? Okay. What experience have you had, Jennifer, with parents who choose another school district instead of their own? Why did they make these choices, and what can be done in your experience?
I have a lot of experience with schools of choice and transient populations. It happens for a variety of reasons. The only way that we will know why it's occurring is to reach out to the families and do exit interviews to find out why they left the district. Is it that they weren't welcomed? Is it they found other opportunities for their students to excel? Did they have a negative experience with us? Or is it simply based on their own personal family situation? We have a lot of families that are moving about due to the economy in Michigan. They're not staying in the same places that they once were. They're renting versus home ownership. So there are a lot of variables that could be the reason, but again, only operating on data sources, I would say we'd have to go to those families to determine why they're going somewhere else, and then try to remedy those situations for our families to stay with us. It is most important that we keep our students here in the district and that we're able to have them from the beginning with the early childhood all the way through post-secondary. You may find that in my packet that you received, I took a different approach with the letters of recommendation. I didn't select letters of recommendation from my colleagues or from my former supervisors or from the teaching staff. I selected 3 letters of recommendation from students because that's why we're here. We are here for students, and these were students that I've educated throughout their life at some point or another. Some were in middle school, some were in high school, in 2 different school districts and 3 different schools. They're now between 25 and 29 years of age. 2 have master's degrees. 1 is going into their graduate program. I did that to demonstrate my lifetime commitment to students. I don't believe that we educate them for a short period of time. I believe that we educate them for a lifetime.
Considering your past accomplishments, what are some of the reasons for your success?
I attribute most of my success, if not all of my success, to my spiritual grounding, to the support of my family, to my lifelong quest, again, to find a framework to make every school a school of excellence and every student a successful learner. My own personal journey going through the educational system. My personal journey with my son, who is very gifted and talented, but the school district that he attended failed him miserably, in that he failed every science course growing up, but as soon as he was out on his own, he opened a chemical company. It's obvious he can do the work. So there are personal reasons that push me, but I attribute, again, my success to the support of those around me, my ability to collaborate with others. I cannot do this alone. I do this with the support of my family, my spiritual grounding, the teachers, and the staff around me. And it's not my success, it's our success, and they know that.
Think about the most difficult administrative situation that you can remember. How did you handle it? And how did you arrive at your decision?
There have been many difficult decisions. However, the one that comes to mind would be that of closing a high school in a district where you have 2 high schools, both loved by the community, both with historical value. To me, closing a school building is the equivalent of burning a book. As an educator, you just don't want to do it. It still has knowledge, it still has value. You want to keep them all, but you can't. And this happened when the 2 school districts that I worked with previously were consolidating, and we had to close one of the high school buildings. I led the team to make that decision. Immediately going out to both communities, garnering support of individuals to serve on the committee, and then having facilitated crucial conversations around what would be best for the students, first and foremost, and then for the district and the community as a whole. Pleased to say that we arrived at consensus, and they supported, the community as a whole supported the decision in which high school was closed, but we did so with very careful consideration, with compassion, honoring all of those who were connected to that building, and then having some ceremonial pieces to put that building to rest, and then repurpose it for something that could, again, bring it back to life, but under a different umbrella.
Jennifer, if you were selected to lead Westland Community Schools, you'd be inheriting a strategic plan that has been both adopted and endorsed by the school board, the staff, and the community. Based on your research of this district and its strategic plan, what challenges would you face as a new superintendent, and what strengths would you bring to address these challenges?
One of the challenges that's immediate in my mind and at the forefront is that of time. With the students coming back next week and the staff coming back, I would want to hit the ground running. So there's not enough time in the day to get all of the things done and accomplished. I also noted that there were several components of the strategic plan that were due to be complete in June of 2017, and I didn't have the luxury of finding those on the website. So getting the information, all of the data, that is readily available would be a challenge to hit the ground running, to have the conversations with the community, with the Board of Education, with the teaching staff, and see what pieces are in place and what pieces need yet remain to be put in place and keep the ball rolling. Again, giving deference to the preceding administration, a lot of work has been done. The foundation is laid. I commend you on adopting the strategic plan. It's a very solid plan and one that I'm looking forward to implementing collaboratively with you.
How do you create a climate that values diversity and inclusion? And could you give some specific examples of how you've done this in previous positions?
Okay. Setting up on the dais is a little different for me, forgive me. Diversity, first let me begin by saying my definition of diversity does not only include race and ethnicity. We have diversity in socioeconomic groups, we have diversity in class, we have diversity in height, weight, lifestyle, religion, etc. And I value what everyone brings to the table. And we want to educate every child with culturally responsive teaching and with a sense of intercultural connectedness. I just had a workshop last week with the teaching staff, and it was increasing intercultural consciousness, and that was specifically focused on addressing our own bias, and then once we understand our own bias, how we can work collaboratively with those that are our colleagues, that are our students, and with our parents and family. Also, I mentioned that we had a large influx of refugee families, and getting to know them, not understand them, but know them and respect their values and respect their culture for what they bring to the table, because everyone's culture brings something to the table. Different lifestyles. I, in a previous district, had the fortune or unfortunate, depends on what lens you want to look at, because there was no guidance at the time, and that's why I say that, where I had a student at the elementary level, at the high school level, and a teacher on the staff going through a transgender transformation, and I had absolutely no guidance. So that was something that required me to rely on my ability to communicate, my ability to be sensitive to their needs, and to provide the best possible outcome for each of those individuals. So when dealing with diversity, education is key. Educating all of those around us, educating the community, and then valuing what all bring to the table.
Could you share any experiences that you've had in gathering community support for issues facing the school district?
With any issue or issues facing the school district, being out in the community, being visible, taking the message to the community is paramount in gathering the community support, be it a vote for a bond, which is definitely the role of a superintendent, being the voice of the district, sharing that message, telling the story. Again, very similar to my resume, one can look at the data, but if they don't know our story on how we arrived at that destination, they'll make up their own story. So it's very important that we get out into the community and share our story and the reasons why. They have to understand why we're asking for the things that we ask for, why we do things in the manner in which we conduct business, and what benefits will come to that community as a result. I always say that people have a what's in it for me mentality. Businesses need to know that we are creating future employees. Community citizens need to know that we are educating students so that they will come back to the community and invest in the community and buy homes and start families in the community. Our parents need to know that we have their children's best interests at heart, and we are providing them with high-quality education so that they can go on to post-secondary education or career paths of their choosing. So that is one thing that, again, going back to the communication piece, being out in the community, collaborating with the various stakeholders in order to get that community support as it pertains to issues in the district. Again, thinking back to the consolidation of the 2 school districts, I felt like I was running for president. We were out in the community so often with the community groups, but it's important to be in the churches, to speak to the different ministerial alliances, to go into the senior complex, to speak with them. People that don't have children in the school generally don't come in the school. And again, I'll go back to my earlier statement. I was very impressed with the community relations here in Wayne Westland and seeing the different community members here after hours. But there's a good portion of the population that won't come into the schools unless they have children here. So it's our job to go out into the community to garner their support.
So we've come to the last question.
With that clock there, it's always being mindful of the time.
So we've asked you a number of questions this evening on a broad range of topics. Is there anything that you'd like to share with us that we haven't asked you about?
I've been preparing for this moment for the past 22 years. Again, having worked in just about every position, understanding the whole child, from that of a teacher, a curriculum coordinator, assistant principal, central office leader, assistant superintendent, parent, and student at the elementary level, middle school level, high school level, junior high school level, and again at the central office level. Coming from a smaller school district, I've had an opportunity to learn and to supervise just about every department within the entire district. That's an advantage to being in a smaller school district. I am most excited about the foundation that has been laid, most interested in working with you in moving forward with your strategic plan and giving you the desired outcomes as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to try this backwards. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
That's all right. As long as they stay